Since I keep mentioning this exchange of cultural influences from the Holy Roman Empire to the Islamic Empire, I figured it'd only be fair to give some representation to Muslim culture at this particular time. We'll deal with more contemporary Muslim culture a little bit later in the semester, but for right now, I'll just give some sort of relevant references to what we're talking about now. Um, Starting with this map particularly, everything that we've looked at regarding to the Holy Roman Empire is located comfortably right here in the middle of this sea of green. Now that green is the Islamic Empire, which didn't exist before the 7th century. So within a couple of hundred years, it had grown from being absolutely nothing to an empire that is much larger. Um, the standard of living is higher. The system of education is more successful, more extensive trade routes. So, if you were the Pope of the Holy Roman Empire during this particular time period, there was plenty of reason to be afraid. And it wasn't just for spiritual reasons, there's a lot to be worried about. So, let's just move forward. Now, there are three things that are common in Muslim artwork, and there's one thing that you absolutely will not find. Now, that one thing that you won't find is actually just olive graven images. It's like you won't find figurative representation. There's a story in the Quran where shortly after Muhammad was introduced to Gabriel, he invited the archangel Gabriel into his house, and Gabriel says that he can't enter his house because it contains graven images. So Muhammad establishes a decree that graven images just are not allowed. So for hundreds and hundreds of years, there is no figurative imagery. That's another reason why idolatry was one of the go-tos when it came to justifications for why it is that Christianity is well inferior at the time to what it was that the Muslim Empire was achieving. So the three things that they did become really good at were one, decorative script, and that's really stylized calligraphy, like you see on the side of this pin box here. Dang it, there we are. Yeah, that's actually scripture. That's it's writing. Up there, that's just decorative patterning. Looks like a dog. Um, so one is decorative script. Two is repeating geometric patterns, kind of like what you see up the top, but it gets a lot more intricate than that. So the third thing is stylized vegetation. So you'll see things that look like vines, like maybe with a few flowers here and there and leaves, but it's stylized vegetation. It's repeating decorative patterns, geometric patterns, and stylized scripture. So there's a lot of that. This is a really good example of a couple of those things. Now, the repeating geometric patterns are particularly common in the architecture. The stonework in Muslim architecture is absolutely dumbfounding. Really be sure to check out the video that's posted below this one that says the Taj Mahal video. It's not actually Taj Mahal, it's mislabeled by whoever posted it, but just pay attention to the intricacies of how tightly cut those stones are. Most of those are pressure settings. They don't use mortar or grout or anything to reinforce or hold those pieces of tile. It's hand cut so precisely that it's just pressure set into the gap that's made for. But anyway, you can see those repeating geometric patterns all throughout here, and then around the edge here you see good evidence of that decorative script, and then down here in these triangular panels you see that stylized vegetation. So all three of these things represented at once, and the architecture is absolutely the crown jewel of the culture at the time. Far superior in, well, my opinion, to what was being produced in Romanesque structures at the time, at least on average. So let's move on to the next one. Really good example. This is a small altar. We can tell every variation in color that you see here is a different stone, and each one of these individual teeny tiny little stones has been cut specifically for a gap. Now you see, again, you got your decorative script all around the edges here, in the middle there. You've got your repeating geometric patterns, and you've also got your stylized vegetation all through the top. You see the flowers and the leaves and all the other accessories. But really, really nice. Very impressive work. So skip that. We'll talk about this. This is something that, for the longest time, I never really understood the expense of a Persian rug. Some of these things are well upwards of $100,000. Even the newer ones are really, really expensive. It's not just that they have a heritage to them. The reason these things are so expensive is because they're made of hand-tied silk knots, like very, very densely tied silk knots that are typically done by a lady of the household, at least traditionally. Um, Traditionally speaking, women weren't expected or allowed to get jobs outside of the household. So if a family needed to earn extra income, the lady of the house would probably spend her days hand weaving one of these rugs. And the best quality of rugs, the most expensive ones, are around 1,400 knots per square inch. Um, and the average really experienced, well-skilled knot tyer could tie around 5,000 of these knots a day. So the reason these things are so expensive is that, well, in a day's time, you're probably going to get at best 3 square inches of rug. And if that rug ends up being the size of this one, 10 foot by 7.5 feet, it's going to take a lot of time. When you buy one of these rugs, you're essentially buying a year's worth of some, you know, poor lady's life. Um, that being said, most of that money makes it nowhere near her. On average, a woman could expect to earn about $20 for one of these rugs completed. They have brokers in the area that purchase the rugs from the women and then export them to, other places like, let's say, the United States, and then they have distributors, and then the stores have their markup. So they become ridiculously expensive, not because there's a lot of time and effort invested, but the people who really deserve the payback for that are very rarely see anything. But let's take a look at the intricacies of these patterns. It's really nicely done. Now, the reason for these preceding slides, because a lot of times you can actually tell which region one of these rugs was made in by analyzing the type of knots that are tied. It's almost like a geographic fingerprint, like different cultures tie different types of knots. So if you were to flip one of these things over and look at it with a magnifying glass or something, you just might be able to tell which region these things are from. This is just one from, well, that was Turkey, and this one's from Iran. But that's why these things are so expensive. Now, this is called a tugra, Tugra. This word right there. It'll be one of your key terms. This is basically, it's a very elaborate signature. These things are really, really valuable in the Muslim world, especially in the ancient Muslim world, for two reasons. One is that they show that you are someone of status. If you require a really elaborate signature, that means that people are actually asking for your signature. It means you're probably signing valuable documents, official manuscripts, things like that. The second reason that these things are so valuable is because, well, when you don't have the ability to convey graven images, when you're not allowed to work figuratively and you're given the opportunity to express yourself or represent yourself visually, this is your opportunity to represent yourself visually. This is who you are as an image. So Sultan Suleiman the First, Suleiman the Magnificent. That's what you get when you get to choose your own nickname. You get to be the Magnificent. Every time he had something signed, and he probably had a scribe do this for him, because I couldn't see him wasting, an entire day or two or three on nothing but a signature. But this was his opportunity to say that this proves that I am someone of status. This proves that I am someone of class and taste. That being said, the sultans weren't the only one that had tugras. I've got a few examples. Just do an image search. Like, these things get really impressive, really intricate. I've seen some that actually look like birds and tigers and stuff like that. But yeah, some of these are really, really interesting. But it's called a tugra. So it's important for it declares that you have status, and it's your opportunity to show who you are as a person. Those are two reasons why these things are so valuable. And finally, the Taj Mahal. Now, the Taj Mahal is in India, and you don't typically think of India as being part of the Muslim Empire. Sorry about that. But for a while it was. It was part of the Mughal Empire, and the Mughals were Muslim. Um, the Taj Mahal is one of the most elaborate tombs in the world. It's supposed to hold the wife of Shah Jahan, who was at the time the leader of the Mughal Empire. And they're basically two different versions of Shah Jahan's life, I'm sorry, and the creation of the Taj. And there's the Disney version, which is a nice love story where uh, Shah Jahan becomes the young king of this massive empire, and he falls in love with this lady who he marries. Unfortunately, she dies tragically, like far too young. He builds this tomb on a hill that he can see, looking out the bedroom of his palace. So every night when before he goes to bed, he can stare at her tomb and mourn his loss. And every morning when he wakes up, she's the first thing that he thinks of, which is partially true, all of it. Um, well, really, his thing is technically all true. The intricacies are what throws this into a non-Disney safe area. Shah Jahan became the leader of the Mughal Empire by murdering his own father and taking control of the throne. Then he kind of invaded northern India. Um, he did fall in love with the bride that he buried inside of his tomb, but she was one of five wives, and there's only one Taj Mahal, so you've got to know that the other four are at least a little bit disappointed. Um, and he did mourn her loss for the rest of his life. The Taj was one of the biggest landmarks of his entire reign. There's rumored that he wanted a second Taj Mahal built for himself that was going to be made out of probably basalt. It was going to be called the Black Taj Mahal, whereas this one's white. It would just be built exactly the same except in black stone. It was never built, but there's a lot of speculation that maybe it was built and destroyed, or people even say that that from the vantage point we're looking at now, the reflection of the white Taj Mahal in the dark water is the Black Taj. But more likely than not, it was just never constructed. So we'll get into some more Islamic art a little bit later, but that's a good representation of what was most prominent during the Middle Ages.